Welcome to Two Deep Hokies Under the Influence, a Sons of Saturday podcast presented by McCoy's Auto Repair in Radford. Virginia Tech beat Wake Forest 30-13. Rob, how you feeling, buddy?
I feel wonderful. We scored 30 points. We won the game. We held their offense, not including special teams, to a low number of points. So overall, um, I feel better about this game than maybe you do, based
Oh,
on
really?
some of your reactions, at least during the game. But maybe we'll get into the offense and some of the play calling, perhaps. But I feel pretty good.
Yeah, man. Why don't you give us a cheers and we'll get into our news and notes.
Cheers to the bye week. And we've got a win going into the bye week, which is about all you can ask for. Get the weekend off. We can watch some other games finally and enjoy those. And then get ready for a Thursday nighter coming next week, I believe. And I'm pretty pumped about that.
Cheers. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll notice I had a water glass. I think Robbie's got a coffee cup over there. It is 3 o'clock on Wednesday afternoon. We're doing this during the workday. That doesn't mean I won't talk about a little bit of beer later in the episode, but we are not drinking on this episode. Had to squeeze this in during the day. But nevertheless, we're here to talk some football. And let's get into the AP poll first. I'll bring it up on the screen here for people that are watching. One thing that I thought was curious about this route, we talked about Louisville. They went
Mhm.
out and they did kind of
Mm.
what we thought they were going to do.
Well,
And
Pitt did what we thought Pitt would
yes,
do. I
yes,
think, Louisville was just they were just subject to the wills of that Pitt team and what they like to do to people.
yeah. And Louisville outgained them. They probably should have won, but the score wasn't close. And Pitt just kind of pitted it up. And the weather was bad. And it just was. I said on Monday, like it would be crazy if it wasn't so predictable,
Oh yeah, it it,
and
it, wa-
we
it
did.
was so. We called it. How many?
Yeah.
We said that was going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, it was an easy pick against the spread. And what I found interesting about the poll, though, is Louisville dropped from 12 to 21. And if you'll notice, there's a team that Louisville beat that is not 1, 2, or 3 spots, but 6 spots ahead of them in the latest poll.
It's They don't watch anything. I'm pretty sure that nobody watches the games. They I'm not even sure that they're familiar with what happened before the previous week, I guess, is what we've come down. The AP poll has continued to spiral out of control, I guess is probably the best way to put it.
Yeah, they got UCLA in there, number 25. I think JMU deserves to be ranked over them.
Hmm.
JMU has played a pretty darn tough schedule for a Sun Belt team. They took care of the one Power 5 team on their schedule. And listen, it was UVA. UVA stinks, but they beat them. They were really impressive to beat Troy this past weekend against Georgia Southern was super impressive.
Yep.
So I think they should be ranked, but they are just outside at number 26. And I was referring to Notre Dame. Obviously, Notre Dame got a big win.
Hmm.
They beat USC, but like, is USC even good? Like, I'm starting to wonder because Notre Dame beat them pretty bad. And they struggled with Arizona. They struggled
Yeah.
with Colorado at the end. They struggled with Arizona State. I mean, you could make the
Yeah.
case SC shouldn't be ranked.
Yeah. I think I think we believe USC has very high potential in their offense. That's all we know. That when their offense is clicking, and it's not always clicking. We've seen that, and we saw that against Notre Dame, and that's a testament also to Notre Dame and their defense. But we know that there is a very high ceiling for its offense. That's all
Mhm.
we know, and we know that their defense is not very good.
Yeah, and if they didn't have Caleb Williams, and this was a talking point this week, without Caleb Williams, is this a bowl team? And I look because and even let's say they had Riley Leonard instead of
Mhm.
Caleb Williams, instead of having the best quarterback potentially in the draft and in the like last season, and they just had an average to above average quarterback, would they make a bowl? I don't know if they would.
They'd be on the bubble, that's for sure. They wouldn't be in the position. They wouldn't be ranked 18. We know
Yeah,
that's for certain. I'm even more excited though about our number 22 right here though. An Air
that would be
Force.
Air Force. Yes.
Yeah, it's and Colby talked about that. He was like, maybe they'll creep up." And I think you said maybe they'll creep up into the top 25. And now they're sitting at number 22.
Yeah, and they are the top ranked G5 team because Tulane is one spot behind them, and Air Force got that big win over Wyoming.
Mhm.
I I think I said on Monday, I think Wyoming is still the better team. I think it was a very good spot for Air Force, but to Air Force's credit, they've been kicking butt all year and they got a big win against Wyoming. Any other notes here? I got UNC's at number 10 now after an
Yeah.
impressive win against Miami, and that's one of our ACC brethren. And Oregon State up to number 12. And they've continued to outdo my expectations for them. Like I thought they were good going into the year, but I thought they would catch some losses, maybe more
Yeah.
than they have now, and they haven't.
Yeah. The Washington Oregon game was fantastic.
Yeah.
Absolutely fantastic. I got to watch that. That ending was lights out. That ending was similar to the Texas Oklahoma game. We've had two of those this year. Just very they got billed as like high caliber games and they absolutely delivered. So that's nice because that doesn't always happen.
Hmm.
So Washington, how about this? I'll put one last question out here for you. What if you had number 10 versus number 11 right now? Neutral field.
Yeah, that's UNC in Alabama for the listeners. Jeez. I mean, UNC has not shown a ton of flaws, and the weapons, they keep getting more weapons. Hampton is a sick running back. Tez Walker comes off, the NCAA situation, starts balling out now. I feel like I'd take UNC, and that's crazy, you
I
know?
know. And I don't know that I would have to think twice about it. And on the rankings, they're right next to each other, but I feel like there's more disparity between those teams.
Mhm.
And it might be because UNC should be higher, not necessarily because Alabama should be lower. The AP gets really fun right in that kind of middle
Oh my
middle
gosh, yeah,
area.
from 1 to 10,
Mhm.
honestly, 1 to 10, I think those teams, that's a tier for me. And and maybe Florida State would be lower on that tier than even UNC. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I
Mhm.
feel like Florida State has shown more susceptibility than maybe UNC has to this point. And I've said repeatedly that I think Alabama's going to run the table and potentially beat Georgia for the SEC title. And then I just said just now that UNC, I might have to pick them in a
Yeah.
game against Bama. So, like, think about that. Like that.
It's wild, and that's why I think it's fun when you group the 10 together and you start thinking about matchups like
Yeah.
FSU versus UNC. I might be taking UNC in that game, and they're
Yeah.
ranked 6 spots away from each other. Washington versus like a Texas. I mean, there is a lot of fun
Yeah.
this year in the top 10, and that's not always the case. And that's awesome that there's more
This would
parity.
be the perfect year for the 12 team playoff.
Oh
Like
yes.
because there's no clear cut team. Maybe Michigan is starting to look like the juggernaut that they are, but Georgia certainly hasn't been, and everyone else has some major question marks. So
I love it.
we can move to Virginia Tech. We'll get to the depth chart injury update now. Payne actually got the start against Wake at the defensive tackle position. Jaden McDonald got the start at will. So we saw some differences here, and maybe it was a little bit of a wake up call for Kelly Lawson and some of the older other D tackles that have been getting starts in there. Hey, there's competition here. Guys are playing well. Let's see what happens. We also saw Jordan McDonald get in at defensive end. He didn't start the game, but he got in there and played well. His PFF grade was really good. Injury wise, I feel like we're at the best position we've been at in the season. Obviously, we're still missing Gallo and Jennings, and they're not
Mhm.
potentially coming back. I still don't know what the final word is on Jennings, but this is still a good week to get the bye because we saw guys kind of go down and miss some snaps in this game with injuries. Guys kept going to one knee or whatever. So whether it was Jenkins or Strong or maybe Burgos, there was different guys that needed to like a minute to collect themselves.
Yep.
Uh, it's good to get a bye week. We played
Yeah,
7
it's a
games. Now
perfect
we can
timing.
refresh.
Yeah, I think that the timing's great. Yeah, there was nothing that looked like it could be really, bad on the field, but you could tell it was about time for a bye
We
week.
get
It
rid of
was
this.
I think that was the timing couldn't be more perfect, I think, to give some guys a little bit of a spell.
Absolutely. College football Monday. Talked about it a couple times already. Every Monday at 9 a.m., I go live on YouTube on the Sons of Saturday channel. Make sure you're tuning in. This past episode, I thought it went really well. I stayed solo on this one. Second time I did that this year. But I thought covered just about everything. Rob and I covered a little bit more of it today. But make sure you're tuning in every Monday. We had our most concurrent viewers ever so far this year on this past week's episode. So it's starting to, I think after a win always helps, but
Yes.
starting to get some more eyeballs on the show. Pick'em leaders. Right now we got Hokie Hustler and some spread, in first place, 43 and 27. That is some excellent records right there for those two teams. So good job, guys. We got one guy right behind them at 42 wins, and then a couple more at 40. But I'm sucking win, man. I'm like at 43% on the year. It's bad.
Yeah, I am not doing. I'm right there with you. It's we're just there to watch everybody else do well.
That's right. All right, let's get into the game recap. Took a little while for both offenses to do their thing, but we got to a 10-0 lead before Wake scored on that kick return, and that was pretty deflating. But then we instantly had the comeback right after that, and it was similar to what was it, the Pitt game where like the
Yes.
teams were scoring back to back. Like we did that again. We got the long touchdown by Lane. We're up 17-10 at the half, and then the second half we really shut things down. The defense played strong. We added some field goals and a touchdown, and we won 30-13. But I am going to play the voicemails for you guys now.
Hey, Pete, Robbie, all I got to say, man, is after further review, the kids are in bed, the bong is hitting, go Hokies.
Yeah, what a game. It's Hokie Hack, and I feel like we're back. Really great to see the Hokies dominate, especially on defense.
I really thought we were going to be stuck at 17 points. Happy the Hokies were able to pull it out.
321 passing yards, 141 rushing yards. Really good play from Chiron Drones.
It was kind of ugly at first, a little slow and boring, but kind of ramped up. Glad to see that we have some offense developing and defense starting to step it up a little bit too. Not great, but hey, it's a Power 5 win. I'll take it.
You cannot argue with how good of a performance this was, especially on the defensive side. They're probably not a good team, but we look good. And we got a Syracuse team coming who has lost 3 in a row. I am taking the Friday off. I'm taking a half day on Thursday. I am going to drink 5 pumpkin beers, maybe even more, to make life hell for the Orange.
Great calls this week. Not as many as normal. People are already in bye week mode, but thank you guys who did call because it was still a great group of shorter calls this week. And I want to drink 5 pumpkin beers because I'm going to Blacksburg for the game next Thursday, and I'm pretty darn psyched. I haven't been yet this year.
That is, I can't believe you haven't been into Blacksburg. I forgot about that because you went to the Rutgers game.
That's right.
I keep thinking that you have already been. Well, I have been, and it's just as glorious as it's always been. So how about that?
Yeah, man, I'm already trying to get my list of the things I want to do in town because it's a long day on Thursday. You know, you went to a night game. You know how it is. Like you got to fill the day with various things. So and not like I've been to night games where like my buddy did shots at the Hokie house beforehand and like can't get to the game. Like we don't want any of those situations here.
Yeah,
I'm a little too old for that anyway, but if you guys want to get in on the reaction line next week, make sure you call 540-251-2169 and react to that Syracuse game. Before we get to our story of the game, and Rob, I want you to think of your story of the game while I do the ad read. Two Deep Hokies Under the Influence is brought to you by McCoy's Auto Repair in Radford. They were established in 1980, and they're a locally owned and family-operated business. And that's what you get here with this company. They do oil changes, state inspections, engine, transmission, rebuilds or repairs, just anything that you need, they can take care of. Diesel repair, fleet service, and they sell tires. And so go there, get your tires, get your state inspection, get your oil changes, get ready for winter because it's starting to get cold out there. And they have that optional pickup and drop off if you just can't get there from work, which I know I have that issue from time to time. So head to McCoy's Auto Repair for all of your vehicle maintenance needs this fall or this winter, or give them a call, 540-639-2933. Numbers right on the screen if you're watching on YouTube, and you can find them on Facebook. Just like that old Hokie buddy of yours, McCoy's is a name you can trust. Story of the game, Rob. What's your story?
I have two stories. One, in jest. I will start with a quick, funny one. But who do you think is ranked number 5 in the nation in sacks per game?
Us? Is that the joke?
Per player, APR.
Oh, okay.
7 sacks on the year. He is ranked. He's tied for 4th with most sacks in the nation, and he is ranked 5th for sacks per game. So, just saying, if you want to go back and listen to my podcast to lead in as my preview for the season, I talked about APR. He put up 4 in this game, obviously skewing the numbers heftily upwards. But I will say, in total per game, he is ranked tied for 4th and 5th in the nation. Anyway.
I think Don V said on Twitter, like, he cooked the books versus Wick.
That's probably a good way to put it. Even if he only got 1 sack in that game, he'd still be up in like the top 25 probably. Mm-hmm. So let's leave it. The other 3 sacks, we can throw those out. Story of the game for me was turnovers and a lot of passing yards. But I'm very curious as we get into the details here, your thoughts on the run versus the pass and the scheme and things like that. But 3 turnovers, 2 fumble recoveries, and an interception from Canteen, which was critical in this game.
Oh man, that was a great interception.
Very, very he stepped right in front. He read it the entire way to the outside down the left sideline. Beautiful. So very opportunistic turnovers, a good success rate. I think we scored on both of those, if I'm not mistaken, the 2 fumble recoveries. And I think Kyron Drones throwing the ball. Granted, he got some help from his receivers, but we'll talk about that as well. And Jalen Lane and what he did for him.
Yeah, and I know those weren't all of your stories, but you were kind of just giving me a recap of the game there, and particularly in the beginning, the turnovers were a big story of this game because that's not something we had been doing at a great clip last season, and even maybe into the early parts of this season, we're having a harder time with it. But we're starting to force a lot of fumbles, and that's awesome to see. I thought the defense really swarmed in this game, and I saw it early. And then it kept continuing where it wasn't just one guy getting to the ball carrier. It was multiple guys. And that's something we have not seen much this year. And so that was my story, is the swarming defense and shutting Wake down was a big one. And of course, the continued development of Kyron Drones. I'm sorry. Let me get this right off the bat, because on Monday, I must have said Kyron 30 times. And Andy Bitter went on TSL later in the day and then said, like, it's Kyron, like Byron. And so that's my bad. And I got like 3 YouTube comments saying, like, you're saying it wrong. So everyone with the hindsight of hearing what Andy Bitter had to say, I will start to say Kyron. I'll probably make a mistake here and there, but it's Kyron, and I know that. And he played great. Let's talk about the offense. And do you want to hit his numbers first and just from your thoughts?
Because it brings out something. So we had 30 points in the game. We passed the ball 29 times. We ran it 36 times, which would seem like a relatively balanced attack, except for the fact that Kyron Drones ran it 15 of the times of those 36. So your actual running backs only got touches on it about 21 times in kind of a traditional running stat versus passing stat, but 321 yards in the air, 11.1 yards per attempt. not too shabby. 20 for 29 with 2 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. A nice stat line, I think, and the
Yeah.
leading rusher on the team.
Yeah. I mean, what I thought was so weird afterwards, and I commented on this, his QBR was under 50. And then, which didn't make any sense. And then the PFF grade comes out and it's the 4th highest among P5 QBs. And I'm like, that is more like it.
Yeah.
That's what it's supposed to be, because he played great. It was the most passing yards by a VT quarterback versus an FBS team since BC in 2019, which was the first game of the season, which we lost. And that was Ryan Willis passing in that game. But think about how many games that is since we've had that many yards. And the 20 for 29 you mentioned, that's just about 70% completion. It was 69, so that's nice. But it's very close to that 70 number, which Drake May had hit every week prior to this week.
Yeah.
And no interceptions and no turnovers in this game. I know he had a fumble, I think, on an exchange, but we kept it. And so a clean sheet from him in that regard. He became only the 3rd V2 quarterback to throw for 300 and run for 50. And that got said on the broadcast. The 3rd quarterback. Evans did it in 2016 twice, and Randall did it. So the company he's starting to keep, whether it was the 5 touchdowns a couple weeks ago and this stat here, there's just not many guys in the history of Virginia Tech that have done what he has shown to be capable of doing in a very short amount of starts.
Yes. And the running is more natural ability that I think you can get off the ground with pretty quickly, and you don't need as many reps to do. The passing you don't, and he is only in his 5th. That was his 5th start. Do I have that right now? Or 4th?
I think it's 5. I think it's 5.
Yeah. So, pretty damn good. And he didn't play almost at all when he was at Baylor. So he played like 4 games or whatever. So that's his, and he wasn't really the starter. So
he didn't start. Yeah.
He didn't start. So, pretty incredible the development that he's made in a short amount of time, for sure.
And so this is the part, I think, where you were referring to at the beginning, where you think you enjoyed the game maybe more than me, because there was some of the text happening during the game when I was sending you. Early on, I kind of started the game after FSU going into this game like, all right, just please don't air the ball out 5 times in the first 6 plays like we did against Florida State. I want to see some running plays. And they continue to drop him back. And there was a lot of dropbacks. The 29 pass attempts, that wasn't all the dropbacks, because there's scrambles and there's other things. So probably had 35 dropbacks in this game. It was too many, in my opinion. However, it was working. It started to work in the 2nd quarter, and his completion percentage was great, as we mentioned. And so once he settled in, how am I supposed to argue with how it turned out? 321 passing yards. So good job by the offensive staff, Bowen, whoever else is consulting with him behind the scenes, because there was a little bit of talk by Chris Coleman about how much does Brent Davis has he had to do with the scheme switch from Brent, because we talked about Brent Davis weeks ago, and it kind of slipped my mind. But we see this scheme switch, and it's like he might have had a lot to do with that. I don't know.
Yeah.
But we did. This one was more of a passing thing in this game. And you talked about Lane. 3 catches, but 2 of them were pretty badass.
When he hit him, you and I talk. I love a good slant play. Good slant pass over the center. We've talked about that. That slant pass to hit Jalen Lane in stride, and to see Jalen Lane, who was banged up after the first game of the season, to see him run that fast. He went through that hole like an absolute bullet, and Kyron hit him perfectly in stride, and he was just gone. There was not even a chance. There wasn't even a breath of air that any of the defense could get in before he was already into the end zone. And that might not even have been his most impressive touchdown, because his second one was even more impressive because he had to make 5 people miss and still ended up in the end zone. Awesome. Just a phenomenal wide receiver.
So happy he's back healthy, and that was full proof on that play. 5 touchdowns in 6 games now for Lane, leads us in yards and catches. Stephen Gosnell was really good in this one. Looks consistent. He's doing the tight end role. He's doing that reliable role, just there open for a third down pass, fourth down pass. We saw that last week. So I love what we're seeing out of Gosnell. Tootin, a little bit of a quieter game, but he did have the long pass play.
Yep.
And it wasn't his best rushing day, but he had 77 total yards from scrimmage. I mean, he's still affecting the game in a big way, even on limited touches. He leads us in yards from scrimmage on the season with over 550, and he has 120 touches on the year, including returns. The next highest non-quarterback, because Drones has like 90, but it goes from 120 touches with Tootin to 60 for Malachi, the next non-QB. And then after that, it's Lane with 29. So Tootin has touched the ball a lot and probably needs this bye week more than anybody.
I wonder where that puts him in the nation.
Yeah,
I'm going to have to look that up. It's got to be pretty high. That is incredible. But I think your point is very valid, that because of what he's demonstrated so far this season, because of the threat that he is, even statistically, if he's not having a monster day, he's affecting a lot of the game in terms of forcing people to cover him, whether that would be as preparing for him to run the ball or preparing for him to catch passes on the outside. He still had 4 receptions for, almost 50 yards in the game.
Yeah. I thought Malachi ran well, particularly at the end to seal it. Like there were some important runs, and I know Wake might have given up just a bit at that point. It doesn't matter. Malachi went out there, he put some nice runs together, and he finished the game with a 5.8 yard per carry number. Daquan Wright, we saw him make another big play, some more explosive plays in this game. And that's probably one of the most exciting things, is because even though we had been winning in success rate in most of our games, even the ones we lost, explosive plays really help you win games. And that 75-yard touchdown helped us win this game. We need some those explosive plays, and starting to see more and more of them is really exciting.
Yeah. And I think if you go back, I want to remember, I so wish that Bill Connolly and Godfrey were still doing podcasting and played nobody, but he was a big success versus explosive in that what that can be. And I think if it's the case that there's games where if you have like a monster explosive plays stat for a game and like a really low success rate, a lot of times that team can win versus the opposite. You could have a game where you have really good success rates and really low explosive plays and lose a game. Just because. So that is an area that we were lacking, and it was nice to see it come out, because if you were going to define Virginia Tech and what the struggles have been this year, above all else on offense, you would say, I think, or I would say at least, they are not explosive whatsoever.
Yeah. I'm with you on that. And we've shown the evidence of that thing you just said this year, because we've won success rate and we've lost the games because we just cannot get a play. Good and bad. Before we switch over to defense, we're still bad on third down right now. And we were 3 of 12 in this one. Have a really bad percentage across like the entire season. As Drones gets more comfortable, I'm assuming that will improve. Because quarterback is like the biggest thing about third down. And it also, the scheme change, if we can stay ahead of the chains, it would help tremendously too.
That's right. Yeah. 3 for 12. That's about where we've been all season. Is almost, we had like a couple, maybe 3 for 10 games. It is not, we have not had a good third down success rate in any game that we've played this year. And it needs to improve for this, us to have a good back half of the season for sure.
The good to that bad is 5 for 5 in the red zone in this game, just 2 touchdowns. So that could be better, but 5 for 5 in the red zone, I'll take that for right now. 7.1 yards per play in this game, the most of the Brent Pry era by over 1.5 yards. Like well our best game in yards per play. And then 462 total offensive yards, most versus an FBS team since Pry became head coach. So breaking some records here offensively in this one, and it's just so nice to have a little bit of offense.
Yeah. And that'll help us slowly claw our way out of the likes of Iowa and some other teams of company that we do not want to be mixed in with. I met an Iowa fan this past week, and he said, "Oh man, my offense is so bad." And I'm sitting there looking at him with like a Virginia Tech shirt on and hat on, and I'm like, "Yeah, I know. I feel your pain."
I've been there. Defense. Our defense really, really came out and played a strong game. I said how they swarmed to the tune of 13 tackles for loss and 7 sacks, 4 of which you mentioned were by APR. That D line got after the quarterbacks, and these quarterbacks were both really bad.
Yeah. Yes. And he got dinged up at the end of the game, and I think he had did the quarterback end up coming out when he got injured, like towards the very end? He was on the ground for a minute,
Yeah.
and I kind of felt bad because he was getting his butt
Yeah,
kicked
you're
all
talking about
day.
Kern, the second
Yes.
guy, right?
Yeah, the second quarterback.
I thought they might bring Griffiths back in at that point. I can't even remember what happened, but
Yeah.
neither guy was good. Have you ever heard of gameonpaper.com? Have you seen that pop up? It's an advanced stat kind of site, and they'll run the stats on all the games and whatever. But gameonpaper.com had the stat: we caused havoc on 22% of our defensive snaps, which is ludicrous. I mean, if most teams, if you have more than 10 or 15, you're having a great day. 22% of your snaps causing havoc is crazy, because we had so many pass breakups. We had so many tackles for loss. We held them to just 35 rush yards on 31 carries.
Mm-hmm.
Our best defensive performance of the year.
Yes, I would say by far, Jenkins continues to improve. Had another nice day. Led the team in tackles, 6 solo. Had a sack, 2 tackles for a loss. We talked about, and you just mentioned APR team. Team overall stats were good. We held them 3 for 14 on third down, 1 for 3 on fourth down. Everything was really solid. And granted, there's two stats that I think are relevant to things that we've been talking about. One, Wake this season was allowing defensive teams to cause a lot of havoc in the backfield and causing a lot of things. So we performed as we should have, probably better than we should have, but it's not all that surprising. And two, Wake Forest, I'm not going to double back too far, but Wake Forest did have a really good defense in the red zone. Not necessarily a good defense overall, but they had pretty good red zone defensive stats this year, which is not surprising. We kicked 2 touchdowns versus and 3 field goals in the end zone. So we performed very well, and the game kind of shook out the way it should have based on what Wake has showed this year. And that's more than you can say that we've done in most games.
Yeah. If you look at just the overall defensive numbers for the season, it's kind of surprising because we haven't been very good, but our sack numbers, we're 17th in the nation in sacks per game after this one. And you said Wake is bad offensively. They let guys in their backfield. They had like 10 sacks against Georgia Tech. But I don't care. We did what we were supposed to do. And Bud Foster made that pump up speech in Lane over the weekend. Yeah. And we had joked, like, can Bud come in and talk to these linebackers because he used to coach them? Maybe he did, because the linebacker play was impressive. We did some different things there. Tisdale had 9 tackles. I think he's averaging like 8 tackles per game over his last 4 games. He's starting to get into that Mike role. And I said that the McDonald brothers started at will, and Kelly Lawson came in and had some tackles himself, and actually might have had his best game of the year as a backup in this game. And so hopefully Marv is figuring some things out here, but just could not be more pleased with what the defense did. Special teams, we gave up the return TD, so that stinks. But that's all Wake did in the entire game. So let's just, that's okay. The fake punt call was great. Yes. And it was timely at the end of the third quarter. We got 3 points off of it. It allowed us to extend the lead to 2 scores, and they weren't going to come back from 2 scores down. I think that seemed clear after they got their one special teams thing. Like, they didn't score an offensive touchdown. That's the first time we haven't given one up since those back-to-back shutouts at the end of 2019. So that's pretty spectacular, and you can't ask your defense to do much more than that. And Love made 3 field goals. He missed a 48 That's okay. And that's a long field goal. But he did make 3, so that's nice.
Yep, I would agree with all of that. And if you take a little bit better special teams coverage, a little bit more heads up, and take those 7 points off the board, and it's a much different game where we're talking about like just absolute domination versus really winning by a lot. So great performance, great atmosphere, just an awesome win overall.
I want to get to a couple takeaways and maybe the schedule down the road here in a second. Randomly, I want to talk about the refs. They were so annoying in this game. It took forever. The crowd could not get into it because there were so many reviews and so many penalties. They called 8 on us, I believe.
Yeah.
And over the last 5 games, we're averaging about 8 to 9 penalties a game. So that is something we're going to have to clean up. But I thought it was just excessive. They were missing calls, and then they were over calling on things that shouldn't have been called.
And for both teams, it wasn't even, it makes it so hard to watch when they just can't keep the flags in their pocket. And especially on when players are completely out of what's happening in the game. Like the penalty is all the way on the other side of the field and it's a holding penalty, right? The play is completely on the other side. It has no relevance. And then they're calling it. That kind of stuff just drives me crazy, where it's like, dude, if you're trying to send a message, the guy's going to be holding on the next play when it is relevant, call it on that one.
Right.
You don't need to just do it at random times. That's not relevant to the actual play.
I watched so much college football this past weekend. Was our game the one with the phantom face mask where like they called us for a face mask and it wasn't one?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, before we get to our takeaways and our picks, I just wanted to mention Rowback to you guys. 2D Hokies Under the Influence is brought to you by Rowback, performance active wear designed for those who crave activity. It's the polo company that brought you the maroon polo with the orange Virginias, the white polo with the maroon Virginias, and now they have the Berg, which is their quarter zip with kind of a two-tone maroon. Right now, they're offering our listeners 20% off their first order using code 2DEEPVT. They have hoodies, tees, quarter zips, joggers, women's stuff, and of course, their polos. Please go to the site, load up your cart, and use code 2DVT. Get your wife to order this time. You might be able to get that discount more than once throughout the year. You need some Christmas gifts. I know. Hey, it's not Halloween yet, but hey, there's that Christmas creep. Always starting earlier. Go to rowback.com, put in an order, and use code 2DEEPVT. It was nice to see a game where we were better in just about every facet. And it was the second game in the last 3 where, and you said this after the Pitt game, we looked more prepared.
Yeah.
We looked more prepared in this game.
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, we looked more prepared. We looked ready for the moment, if you will, and not afraid to the defense. I thought looked very competent and in control. It wasn't a defensive performance where we put up big numbers just because people were flying around and letting up big plays. It was good containment with pressure, which is the most exciting, form, where it's not just like wild aggression. It's very focused aggression on getting into the backfield, but maintaining proper alignment and angles to kind of keep things in front of you. So the defense was lights out, and drones was even better.
You know how I like to create a fake argument and then rebuff
Yes.
that argument? Well, my fake argument is people could say, well, Pitt stinks and Wake Forest has an atrocious O-line and they're terrible this year. Well, first of all, both those teams have coaches that took their team to the ACC title game just a couple years ago, and we didn't beat these teams by 1 point. We beat them both by 3 scores. Right. And so if they're bad, well, that's what we should have done against them. And so I'm extremely happy with that. And to have this staff, after the questions we had about them earlier in the year, put the players in the positions we're seeing now and have them prepared, it's a very good sign. Just like the sign of Drones being able to pass his way to a victory. Because this is going to continue to happen. Teams are going to focus on stopping Tootin and stopping Drones' rushing. And making him beat him with the throw. And
Yeah.
he showed in this game against a team that was playing good pass defense. If you looked at their efficiency, they were top 40 in the country in pass efficiency on D. We made them look terrible. And so all of that I find extremely encouraging. It reminds me a lot of the 2019 season. Like, why did we have to do this again where we start the wrong, like what Ryan Willis, we started the wrong quarterback that season. We bring in Hooker and we have a great finish. There's potential for that this year. It reminds me so much of that year.
I don't know that there's potential for it because it already happened. Is there, well, let me ask it differently. Is there any doubt in your mind that we started?
What I mean is potential for getting like a bowl appearance, winning the final, like keeping the run going. Yes.
Yeah. I think it's clear that we started the wrong quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
What I don't think what's unclear, what you're getting at, is what the outcome of getting the right quarterback may end up being when the season's all told up. Yeah.
Right.
So
because Hooker wasn't a flash in the pan in just the Miami game.
Correct.
He continued to play well. He had some injuries, and QP almost won us that Notre Dame game because the entire team just started to play better after we changed quarterbacks. But let's look at the rest of the schedule because we got Q's up next. And I do think Rocky Long, the defensive coordinator for Syracuse, is going to bring a little something for drones that maybe he hasn't seen. He's a very good defensive coordinator. But Syracuse is reeling, and overall, they're hurting in injuries, and their weapons are banged up. So there's at home on a Thursday night, I mean, you got to feel a little bit good about our chances in that one. After Syracuse, Louisville, BC, NC State, UVA. What is your prognostication for how we finish this year?
Well, things are probably not going to go well in that Louisville game because of what just happened. Pitt, the ripple effect of what Pitt does to people has impacts on other teams like us, which is going to, I think, end up playing out. It's like they don't just damage like the situation, they cause like a ripple in the whole pond. So we're at, what are we at, 3 wins right now? We need 3 more wins out of that stretch. I think it's really doable. BC and Syracuse, I think, are very winnable games, and so is UVA. I mean, that's 3 very, very winnable games if this team performs even a little bit less than what they did in this Wake Forest game. They could take a step back and still have those be 3 very winnable games.
I think the most winnable game left on the schedule, and this is actually a tough question, but I think it's probably UVA, even though that's on the road, because we always get up for them and they're just not a very good team. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to say that's the most winnable. After that, it's probably Syracuse.
Yes.
Being at home, I'd move to NC State next because that's at home and they've been struggling. They have a good D line and some decent players, but going to BC to me is harder than NC State at home.
Okay.
I think. What do you think?
I think the nice part of going to BC and playing up in Chestnut Hill is you can clearly point to what happened to FSU, a team that we played before that game. You can say, listen, guys, look what happened to FSU. First of all, then you point to the numbers. You say FSU, they didn't necessarily kick the shit out of you guys, and they went up to BC and almost lost up there. Get your stuff together. Let's
and just what we've done in our past. I mean, we've had, I've called it a house of horrors. Like it has been that last Fuente trip up to BC, it got them canned. I mean, that was really, really ugly. So yes, there are things to point to.
But I do agree with your assessment, although I feel like there are some things that could make BC a very good matchup for us in this particular situation.
Okay. They've been running the ball well. And so our rush defense is going to have to continue to play well to make me feel good. I think it's winnable. I'm not saying that. I'm looking at all these games and there's 4 very winnable games. And then there's the trip to Louisville, which, hey, Louisville just lost to Pitt. They can be beaten. And Jawar Jordan has now dealing with an injury. So none of these games are impossible to win. None of them. But Q's, BC, NC State, and UVA, we can get 3 of those. And so my chances at a bowl right now, I'm going to put it at 60% chance that we
Okay.
get to a bowl. Do you want to put a percent on it?
I think that's a good assessment. I think, yes, given how much hinges on this Syracuse game and this Thursday night, then I think the best I could do right now is 60%, because that percentage would drastically change based on the outcome of one game, which is that, and not just because it's one more game, it's our most winnable game happening next week.
Yeah, you could, yeah, absolutely. Definitely our most winnable home game left on the schedule. So
Sorry, winnable home game. Yes.
we got to get that one. All right, let's move to our picks. Huge game this weekend. Penn State at Ohio State. Ohio State 4.5-point favorites. I said on Monday that these two coaches have both had that narrative out there that they can't always get it done, or they screw up in big moments. And so for somebody, that's going to be perpetuated, and someone's maybe going to get over that hump. Who are you thinking is going to cover the spread?
I'm going to go with Penn State in this game, mostly because it's just top of mind. A guy at my club was just at the UMass Penn State game, and he said he's a Penn State fan. He said it was the worst thing that he's ever watched. He's like, it was an absolute drubbing like you've never seen. But in any case, I'm going Penn State in this one.
Yeah, that line was like 43 points, and man, they just whooped their sorry butts, dude. That was ugly. I'm picking Penn State too, but Penn State, I'm wondering if their offense and Drew Aller, like, this is such the biggest test for him so far. They played Iowa, and Iowa has a solid defense, and Iowa wins games in weird ways. But that was a home game for Penn State. They just destroyed them. And Aller's been dunking his way to this undefeated record. And maybe you saw the James Franklin clip where someone asked him, like, are you ever going to try to throw it deep? And he's like, well, what? We're just going to throw it for no reason. Like, he had this whole thing where he was giving the reporter crap, but they haven't. And so and you might have to take some deep shots against Ohio State. I'm going to take Penn State because I think they're very, very good. Their defense is very, very good. And Kyle McCord has his own questions going into this game. So I'm going to take Penn State to cover. Tennessee at Alabama. Alabama 9.5-point favorites at home. I'll go first. I'll take Tennessee. I mean, Bama's weird. Again, they are my pick to win the SEC and go to the playoff right now. That is still my current pick. But like,
but week in, week out, you keep picking against them.
Well, I mean, I think they're going to win. I just think even Joe Milton could cover this 9.5 because Bama, they should have won and covered against Arkansas, and they screwed it up, and they let them back into the game and whatever. So I'm taking Tennessee here. I know this is a rivalry, so maybe Saban will have them focus, but I'm still going to take.
I have Tennessee actually in this game.
Okay. UVA at UNC. Why don't you go first?
23.5 points.
Yeah, 23.
I am going with UNC to cover the 23.5.
Yeah, it's hard not to. I wonder if they're come down off that Miami game. They're a little sleepy for a bad UVA team. That could happen because I've been waiting for UNC to just have that. I picked Syracuse to cover against them. I thought Miami was going to cover against them. And here we are again. And it's 23.5 to a bad UVA team. I'll take UNC. I don't know, man. They're going to have a slip up, but I don't know when it's coming. Michigan at Michigan State. Michigan State 24.5-point underdogs in this one to a rival. That's brutal, dude.
Yeah. This game is really weird because Michigan State has a history of beating Michigan when you just don't expect it to happen. So I feel like the cover is not really the discussion here. Either Michigan is going to just do what they're supposed to and win by like 40 points, or Michigan State's going to win the game outright. Mm-hmm. Like there's no in between for me. And I have more confidence that this year Michigan is prepared to blow the doors off Michigan State more so than Michigan State pulling an upset. So I'm going to go with Michigan.
I'm going to take Michigan State. I don't like it. They should have beat Rutgers last week, and they didn't do that. But 24.5 in a rivalry game just seems crazy. So I'm gonna go with the Spartans. And then final game, we're gonna pick Duke at Florida State. Florida State 14.5 point favorites at home. I'm assuming Riley Leonard is not playing.
I don't think the spread would be this big, right? If
Yeah,
he was. So I think the spread probably answers that question. I still have Duke in this game. I still think they're well coached. I think Elko's still doing a fantastic job despite not having Riley Leonard. So I'm going to go with Duke in this one.
I'm also taking Duke. I think it's too many points. Their defense is good. I just talked about how Florida State is not always doesn't always play a complete game. I'm going to go with Duke. There's not a ton of awesome action out there. You do have the ranked matchup with Tennessee and Alabama, and of course the Penn State, Ohio State. I'm just looking at some of these other ones. UCLA, Stanford, that's a bit of a rivalry. Utah, USC, not on the picks list, but could be a very interesting game. USC favored by 7 now in that one. And is that just like a bounce back? You know, they look so terrible that they're going to cover that points. But
yeah, I think that's probably what we're looking at there.
I think in the SEC, is it the cocktail party this weekend?
No,
it's not. Not yet. Florida and Georgia are on a bye. Yeah. Mississippi, Ole Miss and Auburn. That's interesting. Mississippi State, Arkansas for the basement of the SEC West. That should be interesting.
In the basement, but Arkansas is still. They just showed it against Alabama. They're still doing it.
There's an anxiety bowl. Well, not an anxiety bowl. That's wrong. That's going to be with the ACC, Clemson and Miami, because someone is getting a third loss in that game, Dabo or Cristobal, and that's gonna create some heat. But Shane Beamer, did you see any of his commentary after the fact?
No. He
was pointing some fingers after the game about, his guys not being in the right calls or the right pressures or doing this or that. And he just looked flustered. It was a little bit of an unprofessional look, and he broke his foot kicking something. Did you hear that?
Legitimately broke his foot?
He broke a bone in his foot kicking something in frustration after the game.
It's going to be hard for him to do the TikTok videos with a broken foot. I don't know.
Someone said that the other day, like TikTok champion, and he's struggling now. And I said the honeymoon's over. It certainly looks that way. He did say, I think later in the week, like, I need to do a better job. I was frustrated I didn't put my guys in better positions to win. So he pointed less fingers after the fact. But the funniest thing I saw about the broken foot was Michael Scott with the 2 crutches when he burns his foot on the George Foreman grill, sitting in a meeting, and they're like, Shane Beamer in meetings this week.
Where he's cooking the bacon in bed with the George Foreman.
I like to wake up to the smell of freshly cooked bacon.
I'm coming, Michael.
Anyway, I said I would talk about beer briefly. When I came back from Vermont, and correct me if I've already said this, Rob, but Heady Topper and Focal Banger, 2 of the great beers from The Alchemist, are in every grocery store and every Whole Foods in Vermont, which is just incredible because they're such good beers, particularly Heady Topper. I know a lot of people have said over the years, like, Heady Topper's good, but you got to try Focal Banger because it's just not as notorious for being good. But Heady Toppers is better. It is a superior beer than the Focal. And I've got both of them in my fridge right now. I was lucky enough to stop at one of those grocery stores and get them. But even after all the years of people saying how good they are, they hold up. The flavor profile of Heady Topper still holds up and is that one of the original New England IPAs.
Well, I never got to have one while I was still drinking. So thank you, Pete. This is never had it. Neither of those I ever had. So one day on my deathbed, maybe I'll go out with a Heady Topper.
Yeah, if you decide that you're just going to have a sip here or there, which not advising that, but like you said, last rites, maybe you have a sip of that Heady Topper because it is a high quality beer. It's not as like full as some of those, and which I like about it. It's a little bit of more of an easier drinker than some of those hazy IPAs that have come out in the last few years.
Yeah.
It's a perfect beer. Like the Heady Topper, if you're in Vermont or someone's going up or you happen to be close to New England, grab yourself some because it holds up. It's still a fantastic beer.
Nice. I love it.
All right. We will be coming at you next week, Rob. We might have to record on Tuesday night since we have a Thursday night game next week.
Okay.
So I'll be doing college football Monday, 9 a.m. on Monday. Rob and I will probably be recording Tuesday night and releasing Wednesday. But until then, enjoy the bye week and go Hokies.